Oh boy, on with marketing. More fun stuff. Today we start with the first element of the marketing mix, the product. Recall the marketing mix: product, price, promotion, and distribution. Today's the product. Now we tend to think of the product as the car or the phone or the things we buy, right? But there's more to a product than that. You start up by looking at your target market and your market segment. You say, what do customers need and what do they want? Remember, those are not always the same thing, right? But what product characteristics are important? If I'm making a car, how many cup holders do I need to have? If I'm making a phone, how big should the screen be? What kind of buttons should be on there? How do I access the phone? If I'm making a shoe, how much should it weigh? What kind of thing should it have? If I'm making a construction shoe, should it have steel toes? Should it be low cut? Should it be high cut? So those are all the things we want to look at. What kind of material should it be made out of? Handbags for professional women, maybe leather. So we tend to think about those sorts of things. Well, how do we find out what our customers want? We do market research. This is an important thing. And there's two types of data that we can get doing market research. One is secondary data. This is data that we already have that exists in our databases. We know, for example, particularly if you use frequent buyer cards and that kind of thing, we know how often people buy groceries, what they buy when they buy groceries, how often they buy milk, how often they buy Chex cereal. We have all that kind of data inside our business already. We know the sales data. We know how much how much people sell, or how much people buy by the season, by different weeks, by different months. We know if we run an ad, how many people have come within the next week and bought. So we have a lot of data. A term we use for looking at that data that's very important is called data mining. Data mining looks at our secondary data and tries to discover patterns. Now, another source of data is primary data. We got to go out and find out what people want. We don't have it in our databases. So let's go ask them. Let's go watch their behavior. Let's observe them. Let's give them surveys. Let's try focus groups. So there's a lot of things. We have surveys. We can interview people. We can watch them. Now, a problem in doing market research is the potential for the Hawthorne effect. The Hawthorne effect says that people's behavior changes when they are observed. So when you're observing somebody, they tend to change their behavior in some way. Maybe good, maybe worse. Think about it at work. If your boss is around, you change your behavior. Your behavior might change. You might not goof off as much. You might be a little more productive when your boss is watching. Same thing when people fill out surveys. If they think people know what they're filling out, they're going to give you less than candid answers. So we need to find ways where we aren't being tracked, where people don't know that they're being observed. We call that unobtrusive observation. They don't know that we're observing them and taking data. We talked about data mining earlier. But unobtrusive, we can have hidden cameras. Stores will use things like they will track your movements throughout the store, and you don't even know that. You don't know how long they're watching you spend at the shoe area versus the clothing area, and then what you ultimately buy. But they can track that. They can give you ads and say, here, look at this ad. And they can track your eye movements to see if you find the relevant pieces on the ads. There are many, many very sophisticated methods of doing market research because it's of immense value to businesses. In some of your homeworks, you tried to get data on companies. Well, maybe you couldn't. Maybe you said, well, you have to pay for it. That's because market research and data on things like market share and stuff is very valuable to businesses. So here's some problems you might try to do, and think about how you're going to do research on these things. You've hired to find the market share for the NJ1015. Well, you can't do things like a survey, again, Hawthorne Effect. People will think, oh, I listen to NPR. You can't do call-in things. Why? Because you're not really surveying all the people that are listening, and you're not surveying, and you don't know how many people are listening to other radio stations at the time. And you can't just do it electronically, because radio station receivers, if you're listening to the radio, you don't transmit anything. There's no way to do it. You can tell how much gets sent out. You know how much you broadcast, but you don't know how many people are listening. How might you look for TV shows that college students watch and how much? Again, a survey might give you some very bad results, especially if somebody knows you're watching them. How about estimating the target market for heated driveways in Somerset County? Well, you might do something, for example, who would buy these things? Well, it would be people who have large homes, expensive homes, have a lot of money. Well, you could go and find out how many homes have an appraised value over $1 million, say. And you might estimate that 10% of those people would want a heated driveway. That's a way to do market research. Well, the product also includes branding. It's not just a physical thing. Trademarks. The Nike swoosh, for example, the Adidas 3 stripes. And brands. We have 3 different kinds of brands. We have manufacturers' brands. This is the one that makes the product, puts their brand on it. We have Coach handbags. We've got Nike, Apple. You can see these. They're the manufacturing brands. Manufacturers' brands. We also have private labeled brands. These are also called store brands. We have Nature's Promise for ShopRite. Or is it Stop and Shop? One or the other. Kirkland for Costco. We have a regular ShopRite brands. We have Berkeley and Jensen's for BJ's. A lot of companies have their own private brands. They don't necessarily make the product. These guys up here, these manufacturers make the product, but they just put somebody else's label on it. But we call that private label because it's only through a particular store or firm. And we have no brands whatsoever. Generics. Now, these are really used a lot with medicines. Don't buy Claritin, you buy the generic kind of stuff. Right? Especially when the patent runs out on the medicine. Then people offer generics because they know the formulas. In cases where there's high inflation, early 80s, there were a lot of generics. There were things like generic beans, cans of beans. It would be a can of beans with just a white wrapper on it that said green beans, or corn, or there would be cereal in bags. You can still find some of that cereal in bags. It might just say oat flakes or something like that. Those are generic. Made by the same manufacturers, but no brand is put on them. Brand equity. Brands have value. People pay more for a product because it says Apple on it. Right? Their return on sales is 20% versus an average of 8%. So people are paying more just because it's Apple. You pay more for the Gucci name. You pay more for the Ferrari name. The brand has value. And there's different levels of brand equity. Brand awareness is, yeah, I've heard of that. I've heard of Ford. I know about Nissan. I know about GM and Chevy. You know them. Many people have a brand preference. I prefer Coke, but if I can't get it, I'll do Pepsi. Those sorts of things. And then there's a level called brand insistence. This is where I want this product and only this product. Most of you probably are brand insistent about something, but you haven't really thought about it. Women, for example, often are brand insistent about cosmetics. Might be consistent on the shoe types, Nikes or Adidas. You might be insistent in a family on the car. Some families only buy a certain brand of cars. I only use Crest toothpaste. Nothing but Crest is getting past these pearly whites. Right? So we all have a certain brand insistence. And if we're brand insistent, it's worth money. It gets back up into the notion of the brands have value. In this case, we call it brand equity. You got another use of the word equity. Finally, the packaging. The packaging of a product is as much an important part of the product as the contents itself sometimes. Think of products that have unique shapes. Often things like cosmetics and perfumes have unique shapes. Think of the packaging for Apple. It's not just a simple box. They make very classy boxes. They ought to. You're paying enough for it. The color of the product, the box, makes a difference. If you're selling products that are environmentally friendly, you probably want them in shades of green and maybe yellow. The fonts are different too. Take a look at the fonts that people use. Interesting thing, Netflix changed their font. The Netflix font was owned by somebody else, and Netflix was paying a royalty to them for using their font. So Netflix actually changed the font in order to save themselves money. But again, the font that you use can be part of the package and branding. Think of IBM. IBM has a very unique font when they use the word IBM with lines through it. All right, so there's a lot more to packaging than simply what the physical product looks like. Next, we'll turn our attention to price.